It doesn't matter what I believe. It only matters what I can prove.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So 57-year-old Chief Public Defender Ann Taylor, she's got a pretty good record. She will be representing Brian Kohberger. And at the same time that Kohberger was sort of going to court, waiving his extradition, his defense team actually went to the crime scene. You may remember that a cleanup crew was sent there and then actually stopped and sent away. And so Taylor and a team of 4 others, so 5 people comprising Kohberger's defense team, went to 112 King Road and spent, I think, 45 minutes inside. 45 minutes inside the home and 45, and then also they were outside taking a lot of video footage. Now think about how much time has passed and what on earth are the defense going to be able to salvage out of the crime scene in order to make their case. After about 45 minutes, 4 of the team of 5 left the property, but a crime scene reconstruction analyst remained behind. That's according to the Daily Mail. I'll put a link to that article in the description. Now, although they say that it's unusual for defense attorneys paid by the state to create a reconstruction of the crime scene, it did look like in the Chris Watts case something similar took place as well. You had a team of quite a few people going to the Watts home and looking like they were doing something similar. They also took tripods into the house and had tripods set up. Now, the Daily Mail quotes ex-homicide detective and attorney Ted Williams saying, the fact that Brian's attorney has brought in private investigators definitely means he's going to mount a strong defense. Well, he's certainly going to try. And so it's really all going to come down to that clip, what is in that clip that you heard right at the beginning. What is the state able to prove? And how can the defense create reasonable doubt? Can they create reasonable doubt? And we're going to deal with that analysis in this episode. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you have subscribed, welcome to this community. I am someone who's covered many cases. I've sat in court. I've studied the law. I've written many books about true crime. So you're in good hands as soon as we're dealing with the legal narrative in particular. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So imagine you are tasked with this defense. It's your job to defend Kohberger. What are you going to do? And if you think that this is being supportive of Kohberger, bear in mind the prosecution is also going to be thinking exactly this. What is their strategy going to be? And in the same way, the defense are going to be thinking the same thing, based certainly on the probable cause affidavit. What are weak areas? What are areas that are actually not very strong? And you see some of that in the Caitlin Armstrong case, where it seems like it's a very, very open and shut case, and an elite defense lawyer can quickly poke holes into things that seem absolutely certain, such as footage of a vehicle. Well, I suppose you could say, yes, it's a white vehicle, but it could actually be any vehicle. Can you prove that it's that vehicle? Well, if you haven't got the license plate, can you really prove it? And that's actually part of his defense in that case, that they can't actually absolutely prove that that's the vehicle. And that's all a defense attorney's got to do, is create reasonable doubt. So in what areas can they potentially create reasonable doubt? Well, certainly in the area of plausible deniability. Was there a possibility that anybody else could have gotten access to the crime scene? And the answer is, because the door was open, that kind of theoretically opens the door to somebody coming in and contaminating evidence or doing something, either after the perpetrator left, or I suppose you could even argue framing the perpetrator, framing the suspected perpetrator. You could also make a very strong case for contamination of evidence here. The area that might not be so easy to deal with, as Ashley Banfield said, is if Kohberger's DNA, we don't know this, but if Kohberger's DNA was found under the fingernails of one of the victims, that might be quite difficult to explain. If it's found under two of the victims, even more difficult to explain. And if there's a mixed blood DNA sample, well, that is a very, very difficult thing to get out of unless you can find flaws in the investigative process. If you can find possible evidence contamination, possible flaws in the protocol of the gathering and the testing of evidence. The defense could even take a completely different tack and basically say that this is a very unfair situation. They could plead for a change of venue, which I'm sure they will do. Ann Taylor shouldn't be underestimated. She has in the past overturned a murder conviction after exposing lying, basically corrupt cops. So if you can show that the cops are, that there was a lot of pressure on them, that they were incentivized, that they had to sort of sort this case out because of undue pressure from the victim's parents, which you sort of did have a little bit of that from Steve Gonzalez, and also the high-profile nature of this case put a heck of a lot of pressure on the authorities. Was there a rush to judgment? Did they consider other possibilities? Were they fair in how they allowed the evidence to draw them towards the perpetrator? Or how did they actually decide that it was Kohberger, right? Was that fair and reasonable? And is it fair and reasonable to suggest it could be somebody else? And I think on paper, you could definitely make the case that there could be dozens of potential suspects given the lax security, that anyone theoretically could have gone into that house because they knew that security code. So it's not going to be enough just to have quite a strong case against Kohberger. You're going to have to place him at the scene. And it's also not enough to have his DNA inside the house. You're going to need to show that that DNA is very specific to the circumstances of the crime, of the incident, in a way that other DNA that's there isn't. And I suppose another potential argument from the defense attorney could be a similar situation you had in the Barry Morphew case, and also currently to some extent in the John Benet Ramsey case, is you try to bring in the idea that it could be some other person with incomplete DNA or DNA that is sort of a question mark. In other words, yeah, we've got DNA and we haven't been able to match it to anyone. Well, couldn't that be the perpetrator? And I think in the same way that the Caitlin Armstrong case may seem quite simple on paper, when you've got quite smart people involved in the actual incident, you don't have like a bozo suspect. Well, then the cops may have their work cut out in trying to secure a conviction. I mean, with Kohberger, we're dealing with someone with a doctorate in criminology. We're not dealing with Chris Watts or an uneducated person like Brian Laundrie. And so it remains to be seen what is in that probable cause affidavit that proves definitively, without any doubt, that links Kohberger definitively, undoubtedly, to this terrible, terrible crime. Do they have that evidence? Is it indisputable? Are there any areas of weakness? Is the footage of the Elantra, do they have any sort of confirmation of the license plate? The question is, if they don't, then what? Will the DNA then be sufficient? And if the DNA is incomplete, then what? Will there be cell phone data? Will they be able to make a strong circumstantial case then? Time will tell. I must say, for those students studying this direction, criminology, obviously having this case in their backyard is going to probably supercharge their education. So one wonders to what extent they're going to be paying attention and their curriculum perhaps altered, that they really do pay attention to this. I guess we'll see. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.